1984's The Terminator is a film that came almost out of nowhere, becoming one of the biggest hits of the 1980s, certainly putting James Cameron on the map as one of the top directors, certainly making Arnold Schwarzenegger one of the biggest action stars of his time, and creating a franchise that is still beloved and still ongoing to this day. And of course, giving us those three simple lines that'll echo in cinematic eternity, "I'll be back." I love the movie. I think it's a classic, well deserving of its status among the greats. Now, this movie, it of course started the Terminator franchise, which is a well-loved franchise, a kind of Arnold's signature franchise. But the thing about this movie is that while some of the others, they became known as these big, huge action extravaganzas, this one, at least by comparison, is a little bit more low-key. But that's kind of what I like about it. It feels, at times, almost like a horror movie, like a horror thriller that kind of escalates and becomes something a lot more crucial in terms of, what's at stake in the plot. James Cameron, of course, sort of being mentored by Roger Corman and his sensibilities, even doing a Roger Corman production before this, his debut film, Piranha 2, The Spawning. You can see that kind of transition with this movie to what he'd do later. Some of the biggest, most innovative productions in the history of Hollywood. He's created some of the biggest hits after this, including this film's sequel. But there is a certain charm to how seeing in this movie that everyone involved working with such a smaller budget and making that work and giving it as genuine a feel as possible. Everyone kind of knows the concept of the film. There's a nuclear holocaust, and most of humankind is wiped out, and they're fighting the machines in the future. Skynet became self-aware and kind of wiped out humanity. And it's up to the humans to try and stop them. And leading those humans is John Connor. And Skynet's plan is to go back in time, kill him off before he's even born, kill his mother, Sarah Connor. And of course, they send back the Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, as well as a soldier from the future to protect her, Kyle Reese, played by Michael Biehn. And Linda Hamilton playing Sarah Connor. She's kind of caught in the middle, and so the text crawl at the beginning is like, the greatest battle for human existence won't be fought in the future. It will be fought in our time, tonight, in 1984 at least. So that's an interesting concept, and I mean, you can argue, till the cows come home, of exactly how original it is, and there are science fiction writers who have done just that. But I mean, I would say the Terminator deserves mention among a great many other movies that took very pulpy concepts, like with Star Wars, Indiana Jones, even Jurassic Park, as I was talking about in previous reviews, and making it feel genuine, making it its own thing. Because I don't really think, at least in the grander scheme of things, that it's the actual concept, which is still pretty cool. Future robot, coming back, trying to kill people, I think it's its execution in the concept, in the particulars of the story, as rife for paradoxes and complications as they can be and have become to be. There's something very endearing about that and genuine about that. There's a lot of confidence to the way the movie's structured and the way it moves along, particularly in the first act, and when we're kind of still figuring things out. Like, let's say, you never heard of the infamous kind of concept of the movie. There's a lot of kind of almost like this chess game going on between the pursuer and the protector of Sarah Connor in that first act. Two beings from the future in a world that's alien to them, kind of moving in closer and closer, and each scene really progressing the plot along, and in a very entertaining and memorable way. So we have the Terminator, Arnold, he's big buff motherfucker, and he's kind of very cold and calculating, very much a brute force of a character. He kills off the punk. One of the punks is played by Bill Paxton, who I love seeing in the movie with his, blue spiky hair and tire track kind of tattoo, ripping out the bum's heart or the punk's heart and shit like that, and you kind of see him ticking along and kind of learning the gears kind of going in his brain, kind of learning things and picking up phrases, like laundry day, nothing clean, huh? Fuck you, asshole. Things like that. Um, and even like a scene that's as small and short as the scene where he's in the gun shop owned by the owner played by Dick Miller, the great Dick Miller, where he's listing off all the guns, and he names a gun from the future. He's like, oh, just what you see, buddy, and then he turns the gun on him and shoots him. That's such a memorable scene where it really lasts like maybe a little bit more than a minute, but there's something about how it moves along that really creates these memorable segments of the movie. And going just like a robot, very cold and calculating, going through the phone book looking for the Sarah Connors, and he goes in alphabetical order, of course, like a robot would. Opening the door, Sarah Connor, yes, I love it. I love it. And to contrast that, we have more of less of like a brute force, more of like a stealthy kind of character in Kyle Reese. Also, just not accustomed to the world that he's living, always kind of like watching his back. He knows, like, from being in the world that he's in, always having to look over your shoulder for those hovering robot killer machines. So he's very careful in this world, and as opposed to the Terminator just gunning down and getting the weapons he needs, he kind of has to use a little bit more tact, obviously. In the opening chase scene where he's grabbing a shotgun and a pistol from the cops there, and kind of slowly making his moves towards Sarah Connor. He of course knows what she looks like, but he doesn't know what the Terminator looks like. So there's kind of an interesting kind of piece by piece game going there. And it does feel, again, sort of like a horror thriller a little bit, complete with like intercutting scenes of the detectives in the police station, which I thought were great. Paul Winfield and Lance Henriksen, great playing these cops. They have a really funny back and forth. The Paul Winfield character's like, oh, get me a cigarette. And meanwhile, he's holding a cigarette, and he's like, oh, that coffee's 2 hours old. And how do I look, boss? You look like shit. Things like that. They have nice banter together, and I thought that was a good addition to kind of creating a sort of familiar type of atmosphere in these types of horror thrillers. Like, meanwhile, we have like the innocent character, and Sarah Connor seems like a perfectly normal, perfectly, I'd say, somewhat happy character with her life. She's a little bit down on her luck, has the waitressing job, gets stood up on her date, things like that. So she's an endearing character because she's supposedly supposed to be this great mother of the future, and we kind of see her progression to how that could come to be. Especially when the sequel comes about, we see that transformation. And all moving towards, that big confrontational scene at the nightclub, the Technor Club, when finally, both the pursuer and protector make their move, and so that there's a really great chase scene and things like that. Again, the movie, it definitely, you can sense it's a lower budget movie. Maybe if it were made today, it would be a much more spectacular kind of action set piece involving, much more elaborate stunts and things like that. But there is something, very real about the way it feels, just because it's so low budget. You feel like what's going on could essentially be real, basically. And I think definitely the turning point in the movie is when Kyle Reese is explaining everything to Sarah Connor and letting her know. And I think Michael Biehn's performance is really good because he does have to drop a lot of exposition, and a lot of it is pretty ridiculous science fiction stuff, but he does it with such conviction that we as the audience, along with Sarah Connor, we do start to believe him, and we kind of buy into this, and I think that's very important. And Michael Biehn, he absolutely does it with absolute conviction, and he's very convincing, and letting her know this is the deal, basically. There's a fucking Terminator after you. I gotta protect you and things like that. So the way it progresses is really great, and I think what kind of escalates it further is kind of finally that scene where the Terminator tracks them down to the police station, and he shoots the whole place up, gunning down cops like they're ants, just stomping them. A very kind of chilling scene, and that kind of takes us out of a certain comfort zone. Like again, we had the cop characters, very safe characters that make us feel safe basically. Then to just see them gunned down so easily, we kind of realize, oh shit's really gonna go down. It's, all leading up to the great finale, where they finally confront the Terminator and have to, kill or be killed, basically. So it's a great kind of cat and mouse type of story, and I think what really makes it work, other than the confidence in its structure and how it progresses the story along in such an entertaining way and in such a thrilling way, is the characters and the acting accompanied by that, because I think we do ultimately really feel a chemistry between Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton as the two characters, and I think that's completely important. What's also really good about both of them is that they're not action stars, so they don't feel like action stars. They feel very like human characters, as opposed to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who does. I mean, he looks like an action star basically, but they're very human, very vulnerable. So we do feel that there's a threat, and with that chemistry between them, both trying to survive. Ultimately, what this movie is, above being somewhat of a horror movie, so being a thriller, being an action spectacle, this is a love story, and I think they are able to get away with doing it in such a contained period of time. I do really feel like these two characters would fall in love. We have the Terminator, who couldn't give a shit about anything. He's just a machine. He has a program to kill Sarah Connor. That's his mission. But we learn that Kyle Reese's mission is a little bit more personal, as he, before even going on his journey into the past, he admits that he is in love with Sarah Connor. Just kind of studying this picture that he gave that. John Connor gave to him, and memorizing every line, every detail. He has a great little speech actually, where he kind of confesses his love to her. He's like, I was wondering, what she could have been thinking about at that moment, and he confesses that that's kind of what made him fall in love with her. Which the funny thing is that, as we learn in the very end of the movie, she's thinking about him, which I think that's kind of sweet. And so I think they are able to pull off that love story, even with kind of like a cheesy kind of 80s sex scene in the movie, which almost feels a little bit out of place. But I think it works with the movie. And again, another great line, in that one night we had together, we loved a lifetime's worth. So there's a lot of great lines to the movie, and again, the characters feel genuine. And with the opposite character, with the Terminator character, non-human, I think Arnold is utterly convincing as such a huge threat. This is a rare kind of villain role for him, other than, let's say Batman and Robin, if we want to forget about that, though. He is really chilling in the movie, and it's all about his presence. So he doesn't really have too many lines in the movie. I think, maybe he speaks 10 lines throughout the whole movie. But he really pulls off this threatening machine. We do kind of believe that he's a machine. Also helped by some special effects that would be integrated into the movie. Much like we're seeing how James Cameron is able to work with a smaller budget, we see work from the great Stan Winston, kind of earlier days, before he had a bigger toy box to play with. Using effects that maybe don't hold up perfectly today, but I'll still kind of attest that it's at least a little bit better than CGI can still do, because there's puppetry there. Like there's a scene, of course, where the Terminator is kind of fixing himself up in the mirror because he's all bent out of shape, pulling out the eyeball and kind of putting on the shades and looking at himself in the mirror, and you can tell it's kind of a puppet, but it still, I think, works, and I think it's still convincing because they don't revel in the puppetry. Like basically, with a movie like this, and with a lot of kind of special effects based movies from this era, a lot of it is like a magic show, and they have to use certain types of trickery, certain types of jump shots, or quick cuts, I should say, to kind of create that illusion, make it as convincing as possible. Which I think, this is one of the best examples of that. And I think maybe too many movies from today with CGI, they show off too much, and they don't use the trick to it. They don't use the magic trick kind of aspect to it, and trying to hide the effect. And I don't know, but I think they do a great job with the effects here, particularly in the end, with once there's the huge crash and explosion, and out from the fire comes just the bare Terminator exoskeleton, limping towards them. The puppet looks great. The stop motion character or effect maybe not that great, but the puppet looks fucking awesome. So I think it really holds up in its effects. So coming towards this end scene, I think is really a kind of a where we get into the paradoxes and everything like that, because Sarah Connor, after unfortunately Kyle Reese, spoiler alert, is killed, the arm is left for the sequel, so she crushes it in the machine, but its arm is still left. So that's where we kind of create the paradoxes of it. And of course, Sarah Connor gets pregnant by Kyle Reese, creating her own son, John Connor. So the whole paradox there. But I don't know. I don't really dwell on that kind of stuff, because the movie series, the Terminator series, it has the most fucked up plot line and most fucked up paradoxes, and the timeline makes no sense really. So I mean, there's no sense dwelling on it. But aside from that, the story just works, and I think the characters are convincing, and I think James Cameron, in an early work, has really created something special, and there's a certain charm to the lower budget aspects to it, and I think for all those reasons, it's remained such a classic. It's a scary movie, it's a thrilling movie, it even has some funny moments, the characters are memorable, and the story is really compelling, and it has a lot of great action scenes to boot. So I think this is a really special movie. I'd rate the Terminator 4 stars out of 4. This is a classic. Arnold is great. Michael Biehn is great. Linda Hamilton is great, and it shows promises of great things to come from James Cameron. Of course, he would deliver on that. So I love the movie. I think it's just great. I've seen it so many times. It's a classic. Still very entertaining to this day. So the Terminator, it's if you haven't seen it, you got to see it. What can I tell you? Especially with Genesis coming out, or I think it's already out now, but whatever. You got to educate yourself with the classic. Definitely check it out. So I will be reviewing Terminator 2 very soon. Until then, comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Visit Derek237.com, and I'll see you later.